My chosen topic is number 2, euthanasia. The argument that I was focusing on is if euthanasia is a slippery slope situation. I'm following the question, does allowing euthanasia open up a slippery slope situation considering elderly mental wellness concerns and terminally ill children? For a brief background, according to Wikipedia Britannica, euthanasia is the act or practice of painlessly putting to death persons suffering from painful and incurable diseases or incapacitating physical disorders, or allowing them to die by withholding treatment or withdrawing afterlife support measures. Euthanasia has been a hard topic since the dawn of time. People believe that euthanasia is some people believe that euthanasia is allowed and some people don't. You can even trace back these beliefs to Socrates, Plato, and the Stoics, and Christian beliefs regarding the 10 Commandments where they say you should not murder. My thesis is that allowing euthanasia does not open up a slippery slope situation. Assuming that euthanasia opens a slippery slope situation actually assumes that we are not able to set and maintain moral ethic boundaries. A popular counter-argument to this is that allowing euthanasia does open a slippery slope, that even though we try our best, the criteria for euthanasia is inherently flexible. Euthanasia actually People holding this counter-argument will claim that a slippery slope does exist because it sorts Canada. Okay. Yes. Okay. Ooh. People who argue this will claim that euthanasia does have a slippery slope because of the way that Canada is acting right now. Canada is one of the main countries who's actually falling down a slippery slope due to recent bills that are trying to pass. That doesn't make sense. Natalie. Yes. Due to the recent bills that Canada is trying to pass, they started to slip themselves down the slope. People have even been sourced by saying that Canada is putting themselves on a sled, aka falling down the slope. Yes. Come on, next point. Where are you? No. Okay. Alongside this, the medical definition of consent has varied for years. Some patients Yes. In the medical field, there are varying definitions of consent and stipulations behind consent. Consent actually becomes this thing that you must consider differently based on the patient. Think about how a child can't actually consent, and dementia patients have limited abilities to consent because of their disorders. Shifting the rules to accommodate varying types of consent opened up this door for slippery slope, and is starting to. In countries like Belgium and Netherlands, with the inclusion of dementia patients being allowed to agree to euthanasia, we see concerns that they shouldn't even be allowed to consent because sometimes they won't even know who they are or where they are and what they're doing and who's around them. When rules broaden to include things like that, they can be taken differently between each person. Terms like tired of life make it hard for us to understand because the topics are so broad. Dutch doctors and Dutch people have been discussing this for a while, saying that the concept of the word tired of life should be revisited until it's given a proper definition, so that we don't have situations where people are allowed euthanasia when they shouldn't be. Something like that. Okay. My rebuttal to these claims would be that the thing that we see is my rebuttal to claims like this is that if there's a slippery slope situation and your only source for this can be one country, then maybe you should look at that what that one country is doing at fault, if considering multiple other countries are doing this. If Canada is the one slipping, let's look at Canada versus the US, Canada versus Netherlands, Canada versus Belgium, Canada versus all these other countries that are also having euthanasia and have had euthanasia for longer than them. If we look at Canada versus California, Canada has a lot to learn from it. First, Canada has a lot to learn from California. Canada and California are similar size in populations, but Canada has seen a lot more deaths than California. Of course, Canada has a larger spread of stuff, and we know that the US versus Canada are two different numbers. But looking at California and in other US jurisdictions, we can see that the process and the criteria is different than Canada, and causes limited ability for euthanasia to become this popular slippery slope. Second, Canada should actually reconsider how the physicians are incorporated into this. If we look at other countries and follow down their path, it actually removes the slippery slope. And then next, if we're talking about mature minors and people who should not consent, there's actually complexity around this. Currently in Canada, you must be 18 to access the MAID program, aka the assisted suicide program or euthanasia program. But mature minors are allowed to look into it. Mature minors come with stipulation. Canada is following the framework of ideas like Netherlands regarding assisted death by this. In the Netherlands, assisted dying mature minors has been around since 2002, but only 7 minors have had this assisted deaths up to 2015. Canada and other countries are not jumping to allow children the second that they change their laws. They're taking their time and being stipulatory on who they let through, thus not creating a slippery slope of children jumping down to die. Looking at the tired life argument, we know that it can be broad, but under proper care, it actually still works. The Netherlands has had the tired life rule since around 2016. It has not caused them to fall down a slippery slope. Their trends aren't increasing the same. Or aren't increasing as if there's an existence of a slippery slope. Statistics show 6 deaths by euthanasia in 2024 when looked at in 2024, when euthanasia deaths were looked at in 2024 and judged by people Regardless of maintaining these rules, we still need to understand that as euthanasia becomes more normalized, we need to stick to our stipulations. Ah, I don't like that. These arguments that euthanasia creates a slippery slope are valid, but we need to understand that as euthanasia becomes more normalized, if we do stick to following rules, regulations, and stipulations, euthanasia will not fall down a slippery slope. So, thinking back, my argument is that allowing euthanasia does not open a slippery slope, because we're assuming that we will have a slippery slope, assuming that we cannot maintain boundaries, moral and ethical boundaries. My first point would be that respecting autonomy does actually not require us to weaken laws. The Netherlands has been able to have euthanasia since around 2002. The laws have changed with time, but despite this, that they have not actually fallen down a slippery slope. Keeping the fact that doctors can only allow euthanasia with several conditions being met minimizes the fact that they're falling down a slippery slope. Now looking back at Canada and California, we can see that Canada is falling down a slope. Canada has much to learn from California, but if they keep this, they actually will reverse their slope and go back to not having one. Ethically and morally, people do deserve to have autonomy over themselves and access to the services like medical assisted death if needed. Euthanasia has been ethically discussed for decades, but within this ethical discussion, we need to understand that people deserve the right to minimize their suffering. If we look at things like virtue ethics, the context of euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide is actually shows that euthanasia is a good thing, or euthanasia follows in a lot of ethics. Comparing euthanasia to multiple viewpoints and multiple ethics, we can actually see that euthanasia does fit somewhere in these lines. But it's euthanasia that only comes at when people are in need of it. We're not going to go around euthanizing perfectly good teenagers, perfectly good people. With these ethics and keeping these in mind, we understand that euthanasia comes to those in need and as their last resort. My second point would be medical ethical guidelines are actually stable enough for a slippery slope not to become a good thing. Regardless of euthanasia or not, medical guidelines already exist, revolving discussions of life and death death-related life choices. Things like living life, withdrawing medication, and end-of-life care are guidelines that have existed for decades, if not centuries. They haven't fallen down their own slippery slope yet because we keep the guidelines and morals. We understand that they must change with time, but that they are good frameworks. Euthanasia could actually integrate into this already existing framework of medical life and death choices with little to no struggles. In the Netherlands, they've actually been able to do this for almost 26 years, and the guidelines that they've been able to work their way in nicely to the already existing ones. Integrating medical assisted death into a process that follows the ideal framework that limits the influence of others from controlling their patient has been proven to be the best path. California has been able to do this by making it so doctors can only provide patients with a prescription that the patient has to take on their own. This follows their framework of end-of-life care and eliminating people who feel pressure to follow through with this type of suicide. Adhering to framework and guidelines removes us from falling down a slippery slope. Overall, allowing euthanasia does not create a slippery slope when patients choose euthanasia because of pressure from others. Assuming that there's a slippery slope situation assumes that society is not able to maintain boundaries that still meet the needs of those. those suffering. Respecting autonomy and choices of the sick does not lead to laws become weaker. Weaker laws allow for the slippery slope to form. Countries have been able to maintain changing laws without weakening them. Morally, we all have a right to make life choices, with laws assisting big choices like euthanasia. Euthanasia choices like this can be made with practically no influence of others trying to guide them down paths. Medical ethical guides should be stable enough to not have a slippery slope. These are already medical guidelines revolving around life and death choices, and they have not created a slippery slope. Euthanasia has been a topic for centuries, and a lot of philosophers and people alike have talked about how it is something that's necessary. People have the right to make choices on their life, especially if they are suffering. Suffering people deserve to have the best outcome possible. It's possible to have euthanasia when following existing medical ethical guidelines. Medical assisted death comes with many stipulations and complexities, but it's something that we should not remove over a fear of a slippery slope that does not exist when we keep laws. One of the complexities that come with euthanasia is not a slippery slope, as long as we maintain moral and legal standards. No, I don't like that. What is it? Okay. Yes, medical assisted death comes with many stipulations and complexities, but one of those complexities is not the existence of a slippery slope, as long as we maintain moral and legal standards.